So good afternoon and welcome back everybody to the last Collision Hub webinar of the day. Today we've got some of our friends from AirPro Diagnostics. We've got Chuck, Josh, and Eric with us, and we're going to be talking about working with a remote diagnostic company. So this one's going to be a little bit different than most of the other webinars that we've done. We don't have a presentation for this one because there's been a lot of questions out there about what exactly it means to be working with a remote diagnostic company and the tools, the equipment, and the software that they're using. So we want this to be more of a discussion for them. So what I'm going to ask you to do today is keep your phone on mute unless you do have a question. If you've got a question, please feel free to take yourself off of mute, or you certainly can use the chat feature as well, and I will read those questions to these guys. So to start off with, if you guys can go ahead and introduce yourself, and on my screen, I've got Chuck, Josh, and Eric, so we'll start with Chuck and work from our left to right. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Chuck Olson, Senior Vice President of Automotive Technology with AirPro Diagnostics. Been there since the inception, and remote diagnostics, vehicle diagnostics, electronics is my passion.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Chuck. Josh McFarland here, AirPro Diagnostics, Vice President of Strategic Business Operations. Been with the organization since July of 2019. Prior to that was with iCar for a number of years, working together with Jason, and been around the industry for, I guess, coming up on 25 years now. And just enjoy being a part of the industry and enjoying my time here at AirPro. With remote diagnostics and trying to help the industry tackle some of the challenges that we're facing together. Over to you, Eric.
All right, so my name is Eric Newell. I'm the Vice President of Business Development and Field Operations here at AirPro Diagnostics. Very excited for this call and this panel discussion. I think we're going to cover some great topics, and I'm looking forward to some feedback from the people on the call also with questions and commentary. So I'm excited.
Awesome, guys. Well, I really appreciate your time and certainly all the stuff that you've done for the industry. And we always enjoy working with you guys. And as Josh mentioned, we did work together at our former employers. And I was joking about him, one of the best things that ever happened to me in my career at iCar. So it's good to be working with him again on this. So I'll kick it off, and then again, if anybody on the call's got questions, please feel free to use the chat or take yourself off of mute and go ahead and ask the question. So the first question I've got is, why would I choose to work with a remote diagnostic kind of scanning corporation?
Yeah, this is Chuck, and I'll take that. And really, from the beginning, there are several reasons and several benefits from doing so, but the most prominent is the technician that's driving the tool. So I've been seeing there's still quite a bit of misconception out there that a scan tool, you can buy a scan tool and plug it in and it's going to tell you what's wrong with the vehicle. And that really couldn't be further from the truth. Although that accessing the DTCs is an important part of the diagnostic process, and you have to accomplish that in order to get going. But having a skilled diagnostician on staff or having a skilled diagnostician read those diagnostic trouble codes, look at the data, figure out what it means so that you know what actions take place from that point going forward is really what it's all about. And those are the things that a remote diagnostic company brings to the shop with the scanning process. So we've talked, there's been a lot of talk about pre-scanning, post-scanning, even though it's important. But if you don't take that diagnostician step going forward, you're really not accomplishing anything. And there's quite a few different models out there to accomplish this, from having technicians on staff, mobile technicians, subletting to different places, to dealers or diagnostic specialty shops. And beyond the technician, there's several other things that are involved as well. That's why to work with a remote diagnostic provider. And it comes with the variable skill sets from the technicians, maintaining the equipment, the software, the hardware that needs to be maintained on the equipment is another skill set, an IT skill set. So what that skill set is much different than the art that it takes to get a vehicle straight, to get color matched, to make sure that all the mechanical repairs and all the other mechanical repairs and everything's addressed is a much different skill set. So what those are the main reasons that that I feel that a remote diagnostic service provider really brings to the table, and not to mention the cycle time. And Eric's been out in the field quite a bit, and I think he's got quite a few things he can add to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Chuck. You raised some excellent points there, right? And you mentioned cycle time. Though, you know, my main focus typically is not on the KPIs that some of the insurance companies or other entities hold shops accountable to. Surely getting the vehicle back to the customer in a timely fashion, repaired correctly, is important to all body shops, right? People plan their lives around having the ability to utilize their vehicles. So if we can get their vehicle back to them in a quicker fashion, all the better to the customer. And utilizing a remote diagnostic service provider affords you the ability to tackle some of these challenges under your roof, right? It's no secret that sending it to a dealer, though can yield the same result, technically or usually takes a day, 2-3 days, depending on your relationship with the dealer. And if you could accomplish that same format within minutes, it's surely going to benefit your customers and your shop in the long run. And, you know, that being said, you know, transferring the vehicle from person to person with what we're going through now in regards to this pandemic that's all over the nation, you know, contact-free service is important. You see it all over your TVs, all over commercials, contact-free service. So if you can minimize the amount of times you're transferring keys from person to person, you're mitigating the potential for any spread or any issues that may come along with that. You know, so it is a contact-free service within your shop. So, and I know you mentioned a little bit about you know, the right technician on the right tool, and that's going to lead to some recommendations. I know, Josh, we were kind of talking about this earlier today, that may be the most important aspect of utilizing a remote diagnostic service provider.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Just really quickly, you know, what I'd like to add here is, I mean, there's a lot of tools in the marketplace that can be connected to a vehicle, and you can pull DTCs and see data and things like that. And as Chuck mentioned earlier, you know, having somebody that can operate that tool, or you know, Chuck oftentimes talks about, you know, flying the plane or taking a better shot, you know, with, you know, the equipment. Ultimately, the key to that is having somebody that can interpret the data and provide back a recommendation. And in order to interpret that data and provide the recommendation, they need to be familiar with the vehicle, the architecture of that vehicle, how it's programmed, how the systems interact with one another, and what those different DTCs mean with that vehicle and how it's equipped. And to be able to do that on a regular basis, on, you know, one make after another, and provide an accurate recommendation is really, you know, one of the benefits that you get working with a remote diagnostics provider, because we've got, you know, technicians that are day in and day out focused on their make and model, you know, brand specific experience. And so anytime that you can have that and have somebody that is keyed into accessing the service information and doing so on a regular basis and able to help point you in a direction, and maybe go so far as to spend the extra time walking you through some guided diagnostics and things like that. Those are things that you're going to get having access to somebody who's got that kind of experience, that they can bring to the equation.
Let me just take a step back. I guess maybe we should have opened with a different question even, but can somebody just, what exactly, when I say remote diagnostics, what exactly does that even mean?
Great question. I'll start, and I'm sure between Chuck and Eric, we've got others we can add. Remote diagnostics ultimately is a method of having a technician that is at a remote location that is able to help provide diagnostic assistance on the vehicle operating a scan tool. There's a number of different service providers in the marketplace. Our model is we've got a scan tool that is directly connected to the vehicle. Our technician is located remotely, and they remote into that scan tool, and then they operate the scan tool, the diagnostic software that is on that tool. So a remote diagnostics provider is that. It's having a technician that is remote, that is experienced using that software on that vehicle, that can log in and take over and perform those operations. Chuck or Eric, what did I miss?
Yeah, there's and again, that's I've had quite a few discussions with different people about this with remote diagnostics. There are a couple of different methods out there to where you can have the tool of the software is remote, to where it's in a different location and it's being transferred. There's cloud-based programs out there. There's central locations for tools, and then there's local tools to where the tool is local. So remote's got a couple of different levels, and you alluded that quite well of how we do it, to where the tool is local to the vehicle and the technician is the remote piece. But in operating that tool, it's kind of like flying a drone in a different location, where we're logged in, we're controlling that tool, and we're doing the diagnostics. That also allows a technician with a very strong skill set, whether a skill set is the domain knowledge that he may have with European vehicles or Asian vehicles or a specific vehicle, he can very quickly move from shop to shop to share that expertise.
Awesome. So we did have a question coming in that I got privately here. So does AirPro cover all of the OEMs?
Chuck, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question when you say all, because there's a lot of them, but we cover it's 98, 99% of the OEMs. Some of the exceptions are Tesla, and there's different software applications that can be used from the dealer software application to OEM sourced applications that have different capabilities and different coverage. So with AirPro, and again, that's the level of the coverage that you have on the vehicle for the depth. So you can have diagnostic coverage, you can have DTC coverage, code clearing coverage, but there may not be programming or immobilizer coverage for that particular vehicle, depending on which vehicle it is. But overall, for scanning, pre-scanning, post-scanning, diagnostic assistance, it's 99% of the vehicles. The main outlier is Tesla.
All right. Again, if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to use the chat message or go ahead and unmute yourself and chime in on that. So I do have another question that came in for you guys, sent to me privately here. So is the software on the AirPro tool at my facility OEM, like a TechStream or Toyota, or is it AirPro software like Snap-on?
I'll take that one as well. It's both. So we have both of those applications: Toyota TechStream, GDS, Mercedes Gentry can be run, BMW Ista. All of those can be run. And on the second one, like AirPro, it's not a Snap-on. So AirPro is not a diagnostic software. We don't develop diagnostic software independently. There is also diagnostic software packages that from other providers that we utilize with applications that license that data directly from the OEMs for more broad-based applications that cover multiple vehicles.
Okay. Okay. Great. So, in your experience over the past couple of years, have you seen the diagnostic and calibration expertise increase at all at the collision repair shop level?
Yeah, I could probably jump in on that one. It's a pretty short answer. It's no, right? The body shops, or really most any kind of repair facilities outside of the dealerships, and I would even go as far as to include some of the dealerships. Um, they just haven't had the ability to keep up with the technological advances and keep their skill set to match that. And I'll use as simple as the last 5 years. One example I use often is, just as little as 10 years ago, if an airbag light was on in a vehicle, where did it go? It didn't stay in house. I'm sure maybe some people on the call may have disconnected that negative battery cable back in the day for 30 minutes and plug it back in and see if it shuts off. But ultimately it went to the dealer because the shops were not equipped to handle that form of technology. Well, let's fast forward to today. We still have the airbags. They're operating on far technologically advanced systems than we've ever seen before. I had read the other day that between 4 and 7 terabytes of data can be transferred per day on these newer vehicles, and we just haven't kept up. I would ask the simple question to body shops, or really any repair facility: if I were to drop off my laptop computer that had a virus in it and it froze and asked you to fix it, would you be able to? And the short answer would likely be no, right? Unless you're the IT guy in the shop, that might help. But we just haven't kept up with it, and nor should we. We specialize, or the body shop specialize, and I keep saying we because I'm a body shop guy, specialize in repairing the vehicle on the body operations. You don't have to be an expert in these, and nor should you. Let the experts handle that portion of the vehicle, just as if you'd sublet out anything else. Most shops don't PDR, right? They sublet out all kinds of things. Let the experts handle this. And I know, Chuck, we were talking about this. You kind of have a different opinion on this one, so I'll let you know yours.
Well, yeah, maybe a little bit of a different vantage point, and you've left way more footprints in a body shop than I have, me coming from a mechanical background. But just as I've been watching this technology develop, and because of the nature of collision repairs, these vehicles get damaged before they go out of warranty. I think that the collision industry has awareness. They are improving in the awareness that these systems need to be taken care of with the ADAS systems, because they're seeing them first. Now, that's much different than being able to, like you said, get the virus off of a laptop or something like that. But the collision industry has been seeing these issues first and has had to address them first, because a lot of these new systems, ADAS system, those kind of things, they're not things that wear out, that service departments and dealerships and maintenance type shops have been having to address. So it has been put onto the collision industry to also educate the people that they're taking the vehicles to of what it is that needs to get done. So I think from that aspect, from my opinion, that the collision industry has addressed that piece of it very well. But like I said, knowing how to do the diagnostics, read data, PIDs, identify a problem before it sets a DTC, there's a long way to go.
And I'll just add real quick. I mean, Jason, you and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, when I joined the team over at iCar, 7 years ago, that was my first real full-time exposure to the collision repair side of the industry. Prior to that, I'd always been on the mechanical side, kind of like Chuck. And for me, what was really eye-opening was, fast forward a year or two. So this is probably 2014, 2015. And there's this whole big debate about pre-scan and post-scan, and if the light is on, that's the only time that there's a code. If there isn't a light on, there's no code. And it blew my mind, that this was even a topic of conversation, because I just took it for granted.
Yeah. Did we lose you there, Josh? Looks like Josh froze up. Are you guys good, Eric?
With that since 1996 for
Right.
other types of. What's that?
We lost you there for a second, or I lost you.
All right. Okay.
But he said all the right things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so all I was trying to say is, on the other side of the industry, we've been dealing with this since 1996 for OBD, and prior to that for other types of lights and codes and pinouts and that sort of thing. And so it just boggled my mind that we were having this debate about whether there had to be a light on to have a code, and so I guess I kind of see both Eric's and Chuck's point. On the one hand, yeah, Eric, I think there's a tremendous learning curve that still lies ahead on this industry, and making the case that continuing to focus on the body work and the paint work and those types of things makes a lot of sense, while having an awareness about the types of things that we're seeing on a daily basis. And then Chuck, at the same time, the learning curve, for awareness and digging in deeper now than 12 months ago or 24 months ago, it holds true as well. I mean, I think both of you are right. And that it really comes down to the fact that there's an enormous, learning curve that is occurring right now that, outside of the collision repair side of the industry, the mechanical side of the automotive industry, they've just got an enormous head start. They've been at it a lot longer, and they're facing their own challenges. I mean, raise your hand if you've taken a car to a mechanical repair facility. I'm not going to single out dealers, and to have a calibration done and only to be told, no, there's no light on. It doesn't need a calibration. We hear those stories all the time too. So, the whole industry is learning right now at a pretty steep curve.
Josh, you mentioned some good points, and I want to make sure that this is being recorded because Jason, he did mention that both Chuck and I were right, and we have it on recording now.
Yeah, apparently it can happen.
So that's good. But one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, and we should mention it, is the shop's liability, right? When in addressing these systems, and I hear it a lot out in the field that they took their best shot at it, right, or something along those lines. Well, from a liability perspective, your best shot isn't going to work. Right. And, how would you like to sit on that stand and that be your answer? It wouldn't be great. Right. So we just need to make sure that as this technology advances, we as an industry do our best to educate and keep up and move forward.
Yeah. Josh, mentioned our conversations early on about scanning, and I was with you, and when I first met Chuck and a few others, and being involved in Equipment and Tool Institute, for years, even I had tried talking to scan tool companies about getting more active in collision repair, and the sentiment back then was like, well, we're not going to enter that market because no one thinks they need it, and they don't understand how to use the technology. And I think part of the reason that there's been some, I'm not sure what the right term is on it. So when three-dimensional measuring first came out, it took us a while to kind of get there, but that was kind of one thing. When GMA MIG welding came out, it took us a little bit of time to get there, but that was one factor. Same thing with airbags and anti-lock brakes, and now like all these ADAS systems have all kind of hit us at once. There wasn't just one package to start with. We went with blind spot and lane departure warning and lane keep assist and collision braking and adaptive cruise control. So I think just the industry has been so overwhelmed and has been flooded with so much information, and trying to figure out what exactly to believe and what not to believe was a tremendous challenge for the industry. And I think that's one of the benefits of using a remote scanning organization or a mobile one potentially as well is just that, again, you've got expertise there that you don't necessarily have to have in-house. You still need to understand the systems and how they're designed to work, but you don't need to be at the same level as that technician, which kind of leads me to the next question of, if I do want to invest in bringing in-house talent, can I really afford to do that in today's age?
No, I'll start off with that one. I've got a couple of thoughts that I want to share, and I really think it's kind of a trick question. You can have all the budget available for hiring staff and having somebody on staff, but the first trick is you got to go find somebody, and I don't think there's very many shops around the country that are working predominantly on one or two brands. They're working on the better portion of the brands in the marketplace. You might get into North Dakota or something and see more pickup trucks and that sort of thing in your work mix, or maybe in Texas or California, you're going to see a different work mix, but you're still not going to see it narrowed down to a brand or two. You're going to see a pretty wide variety in your work mix, and so where are you going to find a technician that can operate the scan tool, run the software, and use the service information, navigate all of that different information for all of these different makes and models on a regular basis, and stay up to speed on what everything means. So how determining the difference between how the LIN bus operates on this vehicle versus the CAN bus in this other vehicle, versus the differences between this DTC in one vehicle versus that DTC in another vehicle. I mean, these differences are extensive and elaborate, and without dealing with them on a daily basis, you're going to have to go through a learning curve over and over and over again. It's not like dealing with, I'll go back to my mechanical roots for a moment. It's not like dealing with, the differences between disc brakes on a Chevy and a Ford. They're still disc brakes. There's not a whole lot different, other than maybe the type of fastener that you're going to have to remove to get the caliper off. When you start talking about some of these different electronic systems and the complexity involved in them, there's a learning curve that you have to go through from one vehicle to the next. And if you're not staying connected to those vehicles, no pun intended, you're going to have a hard time keeping up. And so it's not about whether or not the body shop can afford that person. It's where to go find that person, and how many of them do you need. I can tell you from our perspective, we've got a bunch. We've got a lot of technicians, and they're specialized for very specific reasons, because we don't expect that it's reasonable that we can have one technician that can cover all makes and all models for all the different types of operations that are needed: pre-scans, post-scans, diagnostics, calibrations, static and dynamic, so on and so forth. That's not a reasonable expectation to place on one of our techs. So I don't know how a body shop could expect to place that expectation on one set of shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck, Eric, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's Josh hit a lot of really good points on that as well. And in addition, not only from manufacturer to manufacturer, you've got from system to system. So you can have a technician that is very sharp and understands an engine system and what an O2 sensor reading means and what a mass airflow sensor reading means, but may not be that strong in body data on the vehicle. And again, having that specific knowledge, not only within the manufacturer, but with multiple systems within a manufacturer to stay up to speed is a pretty steep learning curve, even within a single manufacturer. A technician that is familiar with that vehicle, and I'll use engine controls as an example. We see all kinds of vehicles that have had front end damage, and an intake leak has been developed from something as cracked or broken, ingesting air from another area. Well, you can clear that code. That code will clear all day long and the light will go out. But if you don't know what that data means, what the mass airflow sensor reading is supposed to be, what the throttle position is supposed to be, and looking at those things to verify whether there's a problem still there or not, you really haven't accomplished anything without that verification piece. And that's why it's so important that the technician is very familiar with what it is that he's looking at. And again, not only from manufacturer, but from system to system as well.
You know, Chuck, it's you guys both have great points, and when the question, you know, can they afford it? I think about a shop's P&L, right? Because we're all in business to have a positive P&L. If you're in business to have a negative one, well, you won't be in business very long. But you know, aside from the technician, I think about, as you guys talk about it, is can they afford all the individual softwares and tools that come along with the ability to address all makes and models? I mean, you could be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on individualized makes of tools and softwares, not to mention the subscription renewals and everything that comes along with that to try and maintain a level to where you're current on all makes and models. I mean, that investment alone could and would be astronomical to be able to tackle all makes and models, and really for most body shops or repair organizations isn't feasible.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's not just about the technician, but it's also certainly the tools and the software to use it. One thing I failed to mention, I think when we were earlier when I was talking about, you know, the evolution of things is, you know, when it comes to scanning, it's really become an essential part of the collision repair process. You know, a few years ago already, where, you know, I was asking, you know, well, how many vehicles, what percentage of vehicles need some type of scanning diagnostics? And it was, you know, 70, 80%. That was, you know, again, 5 years ago, probably. So today I would argue that it's 100% of the vehicles that are coming through have to have, you know, some scanning and diagnostics done on it. And it's my belief that it's impossible to repair a car properly without scanning and diagnostics, just like it is impossible to repair a car properly without three-dimensional measuring. If you can't see it, you don't know what you're dealing with, you will not have success, and you will be putting your customer potentially back in a vehicle that's not only isn't going to perform as designed, but it could be an unsafe vehicle, just like bad welds or bad three-dimensional, you know, alignment, steering, suspension, et cetera. So it certainly is important to do it. So it's quite critical. So did have another question coming in that I got here regarding calibrations, well, you know, blind spot calibrations, forward-facing cameras, front radars. What are my options when it comes to calibrations with remote diagnostics?
Yeah, I guess I could jump in on that one. You know, it all depends on how your shop is addressed. It has the ability to address them. It's not just on the remote tool. A remote tool is simplistically a technician with the proper software hooked up to the car, right? So in theory, if your shop were to have the correct targeting system, be able to verify said measurements, a remote diagnostic company could click the button and ensure that it was calibrated, right? But there are two different kinds of calibrations. You have static and dynamic, right? Dynamic's a little more on the side to where we could hook up a tool with a technician and run through the specific cycles indicated for that make and model to complete the calibration, which negates the need for the targets and specialized tools and things of that nature. And then you have your static, which requires the targeting systems and the measurements and things like that. Most remote companies will have the ability to perform those calibrations with the expectation and verification that the shop itself is utilizing the correct targeting system with the correct measurements. But a lot of that falls on the shop itself.
Yeah, and that's I think with that, also that with the technician, when calibrations are not successful, having a technician to be able to perform the additional diagnostics and help solve the problem of why a particular calibration didn't happen. That's the other benefit of having that technician. And again, that same skill set can be acquired, whether it's from a remote technician or a technician on site, or if you're subletting it to another place. But having that expertise with that calibration, because that's where all the pain is when it doesn't go right. And it's still, you know, that this is the unfortunate part. If you get up to that piece to where you're doing the calibration, everything's set up right, and you find out you didn't get the car straight, you're going back to square one.
Absolutely. So back a little back to the, we kind of talked about the technicians and doing it in-house and having the expertise there. Do you think that this technology is going to get any easier, and so that those maybe lower skill, less skilled technicians and or shops could be a little bit more successful in properly repairing the vehicle?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I would safely say no. Technology continues to advance. I think we see it every day, and every year, and every new make and model. The different manufacturers are trying to be the first to the finish line with specific technologies and ADAS systems. And everyone's seen the statistic that by 2022, 98% of all vehicles are going to have automatic electronic braking, or 99% of them will have some form of advanced driver assist systems. Well, taking a look at what's going on in the country now, I read the other day that they're thinking of bringing back the Cash for Clunkers program to stimulate the vehicle economy. Right. So that being said, if that program is introduced, which is sounding like it will be, I would venture to say that flattened curve of technology, everyone knows about flattened and spike curves by now. If you don't over the last 5 weeks, then you haven't been watching the news. But that flattened curve of technology is going to exponentially spike when we start losing those cars. The natural attrition of vehicles falling off due to age and people trading them in will be exponentially increased here in the next few months. So I think it's only going to get more challenging, and the technology is only going to develop that much faster, and we have to be ready for it.
Yeah, it's and I'll add to that. There's one piece of that I see that technology may improve to a point to where just screening a vehicle for trouble and knowing that there's trouble in that vehicle and more things that need to be addressed, we may see some changes in that technology to make just that piece of the process easier at some point. I don't think it's there yet. I think I've seen a little, with cloud computing has made things easier. We may see some of that. But I agree completely with Eric as far as the rest of the technology, the complexity of solving the problem once you identify a problem there is going to get more challenging in the future.
And Jason, let's be honest, the OEs, they don't want independent shops or repair facilities working on these systems. They don't want them involved in them. They want that brand retention. They want to handle those themselves. So they're only getting more complicated, and they're getting more complicated to address and more complicated to keep up with.
Okay. Another question that we've got coming in. What about working with occupant classification systems and OCS sensors and front seat sensors? Is that something that we can do remotely as well?
Yes, all those systems can be addressed remotely, and again, it's the familiarity of the technician of knowing what to look for, and it takes. And with all this, I think we may have jumped over one piece with all this, with working with a remote diagnostic company. It's a partnership with the guy in the shop, the guy that's on the other end, the guy that has his hands on the vehicles. I like to call them smart hands, eyes and ears. because the remote diagnostician can't necessarily see those things. So with that good partnership between the remote diagnostic company and addressing those, making sure that you inspect the seat, make sure you put the seat in the right position, and make sure that you get the vehicle in that correct state for those occupant detection system calibrations and tests of verifying they're correct is absolutely something that can be brought to the table, and it requires the right software applications in order to address those. And the same applies with other system steering angle systems, ABS as well. So establishing that good working relationship has to be there in order for this to work effectively.
Yeah, I think, Chuck, that's a great point when it comes to the partnership and relationship. So if I'm going to, in my shop, employ, the services of a remote diagnostic organization, for that eyes and ears that you've got there, what types of skills should I be looking for in that technician? Who should I be assigning to kind of work with you on something like this?
If I had my chance to choose a technician, and the skill sets of those technicians is somebody that is a good all-around mechanical technician, somebody that's fixing window motors, doing those kind of things, knows how to check a fuse, is proficient at charging batteries, inspecting batteries, those kind of things, and is open and willing to learn more and progress their career as well. We've had a few clients that we've spoken with that with this, and they come back with their technicians that they have learned so much just by working with a diagnostician that now they have a desire to get into that area. They want to continue to progress and learn that diagnostics at a deeper level. So those would be the skill sets, the basic skill sets, just basic electrical. I can check a battery, I can check a fuse, I can make sure that something's connected, I can do a basic wire repair, is the ideal person for our remote diagnosticians to work with.
So this is where I actually somewhat disagree with Chuck, right? I think that one of the benefits of a remote diagnostic service provider is that you could have little to no experience at the vehicle because your plethora of experience is coming in remotely, right? So now granted, when you have to dive into some problematic vehicles, surely Chuck's point is accurate, where you're going to have someone that when you say go check the battery cable, they should at least know where that's located. But I like to tell people that if you could plug a toaster into the wall and press the button down to make some toast, you could operate the AirPro or any remote service device, right? That's the benefit of having the remote service, is that it's very simplistic, it's very scalable, and everyone in the shop down to your entry-level employee should be able to submit some form of service request and operate the key cycles for your basic diagnostic needs.
That's interesting perspective there. I could certainly appreciate that. So with regard to that technician too, that's going to be working with it. What are some of the preparation steps that need to take place before I make that call to you or fill out my service request or whatever that process is? What do I need to do in advance? I know it happens quite a bit, when we call for service on something and we're not prepared. We haven't, done any of the prep work. What are some things that I need to do in advance of giving you guys a shout to do some work with us?
Well, first off, don't ask for help and go to lunch.
Yeah, that does happen. I'll start quickly, and I'm sure Chuck and Eric have a few things they can add in. Really, it boils down to in the case of an AirPro device, having battery support on the vehicle, having the air, near the vehicle and connected to the vehicle, plugged in, because it is a scan tool that does consume power. So having support, battery support for the AirPro device itself is a good thing. The and having a phone nearby so that you're available when our technician picks up that service request and reaches out and says, okay, I need you to cycle the key, or I need you to, walk past one of the rear park sensors and verify that it's reading correctly, or that sort of thing. Because there are going to be, things that we're going to call and ask the technician at the vehicle to perform for us. But those initial steps are pretty simple. They're pretty obvious. And, having the vehicle in an area where it can run if it needs to, so the proper ventilation. But outside of that, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Eric, what about you?
No, I completely agree with you. And we have me saying that on recording. So you're right. I think one of the most important aspects of it that is so commonly missed, as you mentioned, is battery support. And it's not a jump box, right? A lot of shops I walk in, they got a jump box hooked up to the vehicle. That's not proper battery support. Many of these systems, Honda's famous for it. A lot of them are famous for it. If they don't have the proper voltage running through the vehicle, you're not going to have the ability to take a look at those individualized modules. So I just stress so much, make sure you have battery support on the vehicle, and before you get the process started, that will help tremendously. I'm sure I missed something, Chuck.
I'll add one other thing. Sorry, Chuck, I'm jumping in back ahead of you, but we've actually got a comment in the chat that's a great catch from Kelly, and that is when you're filling out the request, putting in an accurate damage description of what's going on with the vehicle and photos if possible. So photo documentation and written documentation of the condition of the vehicle is really helpful, because it gives our technician on our end the ability to be more prescriptive about what they're seeing and why certain DTCs might be present. Sorry, Chuck, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. So I seen that as well, and that was popping up on my list. So I'm just going to go down, in addition to what these guys have mentioned, a kind of a list of things that increases the time of a scan getting things done, and causes interruptions for the shops and the remote diagnostician, and they're pretty basic. So follow this list with battery, the battery voltage, and those kind of things, and hooking up, damage description, but steering wheel straight ahead. Set your tire pressures. Make sure the seat's in the rearmost lowest position with the backrest up. Nothing on the seat. Look under the seat and make sure that there's nothing under the seat. Because our diagnostic technicians are going to go in, they're going to know that this year make and model needs an occupant detection system, either an inspection or an inspection and a calibration both. And as they're looking at those things, if they see something that isn't making sense, that's going to prompt a phone call and then another action that's going to be asked. So if you have all these things prepared before you put in this scan request, the diagnostician logs in and starts doing work, those tasks are going to be accomplished much quicker and much more efficiently, and they're going to hit all those points with less interruption. And again, that's if you don't tell a technician that I've got a wheel off of a car, or I haven't put a door back together, and request a scan, and the remote diagnostician, he can't see it. So he's going to start diagnosing a problem that just because he hasn't been told that it's there.
If we could real briefly go back to Eric, you mentioned the battery swell, and Chuck, you did too, but what's so important about battery support? What can go wrong if I don't have that adequate voltage?
Well, I think Chuck's likely going to have a lot more to say than I, but I think the most upfront problem would be maybe your battery goes dead in the process of running the diagnostic, right? We all know that the battery wasn't dead before the accident, right? Ever. Every car comes in with a brand new battery in it and great voltage. But that would be the most obvious thing that could happen. Aside from that, without proper voltage, Chuck, I know you're going to want to get into this because this is going to get pretty technical. But without proper voltage, you may not have access to some of the modules in the vehicle.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that, Eric. So there's plenty of functions that require a certain voltage level in order for them to be successful. And if you've got a vehicle with low voltage or a failing battery, that problem needs to be addressed before you can even start diagnostics. And with today's vehicles, that threshold for low battery voltage has gotten worse to what it used to be. It used to be if you had a vehicle at around 9.5, 9.6, 9.7 volts, the modules on the vehicle, we had much less of them a few years back, would stay awake. Today, once you get, you get down around the 10 volt, 10.5 volt range on a vehicle, you have modules that start shutting down, or they can get down to a point with to where you can end up losing data, and all of the data that you are looking at is contingent on and is calculated by the scan tool and the internal logic on the modules with the input voltage in order to give you accurate data. So if the battery voltage is out of range or is low, and this is the main reason that I got to give a little plug just for us. That's why we put a voltmeter that shows system line voltage right on the AirPro, so that you can see it.
Cool. All right, we got a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to have you answer them there. So as you're coming up with them, let me real quickly here share.
Am I allowed to ask questions, Jason?
You are not. I'm sorry. You've been disqualified.
Definitely not.
I go to ask scanning questions and Jason always cringes. Okay. I have a couple, and I'm going to ask that you guys try to translate me, because I'm not even sure how to ask this, so I hope I ask it clearly. But so one of the things that I get to negotiate, I'm not going to say argue, I get to negotiate frequently with insurers is pre-scan reports. So there's this belief that, you print this pre-scan and there's unrelated codes, and so therefore we don't owe anything. So I guess my kind of question is can codes seem related or seem unrelated but be related, and is that the value of having a really high educated technician? So my example is always, let's say I scan the car and all I get is low voltage. Can that code mask something else that's more than just my battery's almost dead? Does that make sense? Am I even making any sense? Josh is going,
you're
no.
making. That makes sense to me. Yes, having low voltage codes, and I've seen this many times. The assumption is, the vehicle just had a dead battery. But you can have a damaged ground wire terminal. There can be damage in other areas. So those things need to be looked at further. So once you start getting into low voltage situations, you have to find out why. So the scan tool and the results of the scan tool aren't going to necessarily tell you if a diagnostic trouble code or a situation is related to the vehicle or not until you put that inspection together with the data. That triggers that you've got to look at something and determine what the cause is. And the cause may be a battery is 5 years old and needs to be replaced. But that cause may be that a cable got damaged, that a fuse block got damaged, that is causing a voltage drop and driving voltage down. Yeah. You can't just discount a diagnostic trouble code or a voltage situation without further inspection.
Yeah, I think to your point, Kristen, is with a pre-scan report, with these systems now running in series, what could seem non-accident related would very well could be, because we don't know how these systems are running in series and what's affecting what. I know I saw, it might have even have been you, Kristen, that posted about 8-9 months ago about a vehicle that was hitting the rear, but it affected the front headlights, right? And that kind of thing happens. I reference also when you go to the doctor, after they make you wait 45 minutes in the waiting room when you're not on time for your appointment, what do? They take your vitals, right? They get a baseline of where you're at, and so that they can see at the end whether they've created positive or negative results. So
right. I mean, I don't want to preach or anything, but to me, that's the biggest value that you guys bring to the table for me, is that I don't know those things. And so, you know, my body techs don't know that either, and neither do my estimators. So if I run a scan report that maybe shows me like a low voltage, and go, there's nothing wrong with this car. God, what could I miss if I'm, you know, and I keep thinking about these companies that just want to print me some flat PDF reports and go, oh, look, you pre-scanned. Yeah, what am I missing? And then how may that hurt my consumer on down the end of the line of the repair, and the assumptions some people make, thinking it's just push a button and get a report. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think, you know, Kristen, your point there is well made, in that, you know, and yes, this is recorded. Now you me saying that you're right about something. So kudos to you.
Good day.
Everybody's getting their turn.
Yeah.
This will totally be a video on Facebook in about 20 minutes. Just
Perfect.
saying.
I can't wait. As long as I've still got my background, I'll be fine.
Yeah. And I'm going to give you hair. It's okay.
Yeah. No, come on, don't do that. So I think it's a good point, in that, you know, ultimately these scan tools, it doesn't matter which one you've got, who it's from, what remote service provider it is, etc. There isn't the click a button and it tells you what's wrong with the car. I hear Chuck say it all the time. There is no easy button for this. You know, at most you're going to get a pull of what DTCs are present in the vehicle. But even then, depending on the software you're using, whether it's OEM or some other, you know, sourced, you know, software, regardless of where it's from, it may or may not pull all the different modules. You know, and so if you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what you're looking for, and you don't know where to go look beyond what, you know, what might just pop up as a result of that first pull for DTCs, you're not going to see everything that's going on. You're not going to know everything that's present. And so you've got to know where to go look, where to go dig, in order to get that additional information. And then what you've got is you've got a make and a model, and you've got the description of damage that you know from having looked at the vehicle, and you've got a list of DTCs. Great. So now what do I do with them? And that ties right back to a comment that's in the chat right now from Chad, about when doing a pre-scan and there's an issue, for example, on the airbag, does a diagnostic tech provide code information and what to look for when doing a blueprint? Absolutely. Our report, whether it's us or any of our competitors in the remote service space, our report is going to give you a list of recommendations on things to go check for that make and model, the damage that's present, and the DTCs that are present, to walk you through what to go look for, how to check for it, etc. That's the service.
That's the
If
secret
you're just looking
sauce.
for somebody to operate the tool, then, you know, we can help with that, but you need more than that.
Yeah.
You need somebody that can tell you what to do with the results of what you got from the tool. And
Yeah.
that's where we're coming in to help.
And that's what's missing huge right now. And not to, I mean, insurers write policies that identify loss. So this isn't on them. I'm not blaming them, but there's this general push right now to push that everything should be in-house and the shop should do everything. And there's some tooling in use. I was talking to a regional MSO. I think they only have like 17 stores. And they're completely 100% on aftermarket tooling. And I'm like, you just don't know what you're missing. I mean, you're not intentionally missing it, but you don't know what you're missing. And you know, is that going to come back and haunt you? The other code that I have, or question code, I don't have a code. Yeah. The other question I have, there was a presentation, I want to say it was last week, in which they mentioned a tech service bulletin from Honda about they had changed the blind spot monitors, and that if we were going to replace one side, we had to replace the other. And I'll just be honest, I had completely that. And I've done a lot of research on Hondas over the past year. And so I felt guilty. Like, how did I not see that tech service bulletin and those kind of things? But is that something, these tech service bulletins, these must replace things, is that something that you, because you guys live, eat, sleep, and breathe this, is that another service that a third party can help me out with as a shop?
Chuck, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a tough one with tech service bulletins and the requirements to place things, because there can be updates. We do reviews tech service bulletins, but I would advise those kind of questions to contact your provider and partner up on researching and determining whether the tech service bulletin applies to your specific situation. Because just because there's a bulletin doesn't mean you have to do it. So you got to look at the background of the bulletin. And our technicians do that. Is that a routine part of the service that we do? Not necessarily. If a diagnostic trouble code flags up or a certain situation flags up a technical service bulletin, we'll make the shop aware and work with them to determine if it applies or not.
Cool.
Kyle, I know you've been waiting to get in. What do you got for us, bud?
When you're using the AirPro, a big thing for me is I want to know, like, because I got to know everything going on. So I want to know if I'm seeing code faults or if I'm seeing like low voltage or anything of the sort. I want to know how many key cycles since that fault. That'll really help me determine, because I mean, as much faith as I put in the AirPro and their technicians on the other end, I can't always count on that. So I have to know as well, being is that I'm the one writing it and working with the technicians on what they need to do. I've talked with some technicians that will let me know where I can find the key cycles. I still haven't been able to find them on the AirPro itself, where I can find that information. That would be some good information to have, you know?
Yeah, the key cycles or frequency counters, since a fault has set or the last time a fault has set, that's really variable from manufacturer and system to system. And for engine controls and emission controls, they have mandated governmental instructions of how this is supposed to be done. For everything outside of emission controls, it's up to the OEM of what they show you. So you may have something like mileage, you may have something like key cycles of when a fault's set. And I kind of think that's what you're asking for that information,
Yeah.
to help you determine, was this a condition that was pre-existing, or did this pop up after the date of loss? So to help determine those kind of things, we got that. That's what you're addressing, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Chuck, that's a great question too, Kyle, because we've all had it where we repair a car and it comes back, right? It comes back with a specific DTC or some kind of code, and we have we have the reports built out that you could reference. But for those who don't know, at least specific to us, we actually record every screen session on every diagnostics that we do. So we could actually go double time back and take a look at the screen session and determine whether or not those DTCs or codes were there at the time of our original, was it missed by a technician? Because let's be honest, we have a human element introduced into this, right? And we have the ability to go back and look at those recorded screen sessions, and that's on every single diagnostic that we perform. It's fully recorded and documented, so we have the ability to go double back and take a look at that too.
And the final thing, I'll add one final thing on that. So if you have a situation that you suspect something, maybe, and again, this is on the information, where's the damage, is the door off the vehicle, that kind of stuff. If you suspect that there's pre-existing issues, and to prompt a technician to dig further for those kind of frequency counters or failure records, like I say, they don't always automatically display with a diagnostic trouble code, but your technician will look for those.
Yeah, just put in the service request, just indicate a note that that's something that you're looking for, and they can certainly help to dig and see what's available.
Yeah, to facilitate that.
All right, so another question.
Great question.
So we've got a specific example, specific vehicle, but I think this certainly applies to a lot of vehicles. And we kind of talked about, Josh, you mentioned earlier, but well, if there's no light in the dash, there's no problem, right? Well, same thing here with regards to not having trouble codes. So this particular scenario is a 2014 Honda Odyssey where the backup camera is not working following a quarter panel repair with no codes in the vehicle. What do I do in a situation like that?
That's a symptom-based diagnostics. There are some of these systems, especially with backup cameras, that the backup camera is not on the diagnostic data bus. It's a standalone system. So there may be some conventional diagnostics to address that issue, but it's an absolute great clue that you scanned the vehicle and found out that there's no diagnostic trouble code. So that's your clue that this system is most likely a standalone system. And now you got to hit the service manual and figure out how that system works, because these things change year to year, model to model.
Old school diagnostics.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Wait, you can't fix it with the scan tool? I don't understand.
That's why you just had to push a button.
Just unplug it for a half hour.
Go. Anything else from anybody? Going once, going twice. I don't think we missed any. Let me just scan real quickly here. I think we got everything. Oh, I'm sorry. Sean's, I do have one more here from another Uper here. Sean's asking, does AirPro have options for HD fleet? Are you looking into that?
Well, Chuck, you want to grab that?
Yeah, the R&D project is in progress.
Okay.
So we'll give you an update as if anything above the 4500 series vehicles becomes available.
Well, awesome. Everybody, I appreciate your time. Chuck, Josh, Eric, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. And not a little bit of a preview, where we've been talking to AirPro quite a bit recently, and we're looking to do a lot more of these webinars. So certainly keep your eyes open moving in the future for this. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Kristen, what do we have going on tomorrow? If you're still there, you're still there, right?
Here. I am, yeah, eating dinner. We are going to break the internet tomorrow. I am probably guessing. So there's this other bald guy that's going to give a talk on steering columns, which will be very exciting. So we're going to be talking about some inaccuracies in some of the data that's out there around steering columns, and then some of the heartache and confusion and problems it causes for technicians. So I was saying earlier, when somebody does something good, we will celebrate it. And when something isn't good, we'll talk about it. So tomorrow we're going to talk about it. So that's going to be a good one. And then, Sada is going to come back, or Dan Am. So Tony Larimer and the guys out of Minnesota are going to come back, and we're going to talk about air pipe selection, in your shop, and then how to run loops. So if you don't want to have a reservoir tank, you can run loops with your piping and get reserve air so that you don't have to run your compressor so hard. And we'll talk about what pipe you should never install in a collision repair shop. So big day tomorrow. No pressure, Jason, just saying.
No, my night is now set out in front of me, so I know what I'll be doing all night long. So no, it should be good. So looking forward to tomorrow. So, well, again, guys, thank you very much. Thank you, AirPro, for sponsoring this evening session, and many thanks to Chuck, Josh, and Eric for their expertise. Let me flash their information one more time real quickly before we go, in case somebody didn't catch that before. There's Chuck's information, Eric, and Josh. So, guys, thank you again. And I hope everybody has a
thank you, Jason
everybody.
and Kristen, for the opportunity. Appreciate the opportunity. And you know, if there's any other questions that pop up, our contact information is on the screen. We'd be happy to help.
Yeah, I'm going to highly encourage anybody that's not working with a third-party diagnostics company to get on it. So you know, there's a lot we struggle with in the collision repair business. That is our body techs focusing on welding and adhesives and those things. We simply can't know all of this. So yeah, when I feel like my heart's got a problem, I go and see a cardiologist. So having specialists that help you fix cars right is absolutely what you want to do today. We cannot be specialists in all makes and models. So give them a call, talk to them, learn about the products and services and tools they have. AirPro is what I have in the shop here. So I use, you know, a couple different services, but when something goes wrong, I hit a button and then I make Chuck fix it. So Chuck, fix it. So everyone send Chuck a sympathy gift, right? All right. Well, thanks. Hopefully we will see you all tomorrow.
Yep. Thank you very
Bye.
much. And there we
Bye.
go.
Thanks,
everyone.
One more quick testimony before we go. Before Steve Kyle's just sat back down. Kyle's telling AirPro is excellent. If you're on the fence, jump and buy now. So testimonial there from an actual customer. So give these guys a call.
I
Thanks,
saw a friend
Kyle.
request from Kyle too. so-
Hey, yeah, Kyle, they're not sending you anything, dude. It's not happening.
What? I just want a T-shirt, man. That's it.
I'll work on a T-shirt for you,
Dude.
Kyle.
No. If you're talking, I want a hoodie, not a T-shirt.
So here we go. Now we're in a negotiation. This is where we all got to go.
I am sorry. He did take my negotiation class.
Kyle, your audio just cut out, Kyle. Can't hear you. Sorry, buddy.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.